Okay, hi, and welcome to this latest Compassion Check-In, and a really warm welcome to those of you who are regulars. Rob Neal, OBE, Darren Sylvester, acclaimed barrister in the past, lawyer now, and Frank, welcome, it's your second time. Iris, a regular, so glad that you're here, and I know that there's friends who you've invited. Let's hope that some of them may join us today or on future days. Welcome, Viv, good to see you here for the first time.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of people who are just coming in. I think Maggie is just arriving. A very, very warm welcome, Maggie. We're just going live. And everyone, today's topic is leadership. And I think it's a really appropriate topic for us to be talking about here on Compassion Check-In, because it's interesting, isn't it? I remember when I very first, in the early days of my career, nobody talked about leadership. People talked about management a lot. And then over the last 15 years, leadership, the number of books written about leadership, the number of courses on leadership, leadership is constantly under the spotlight. And I guess at times like these, principled leadership, Stephen Covey, excellent. Yeah, you know, it's on everybody's lips. And of course, there have been so many questions around leadership that today, as we record this, I happen to watch a little bit of news for the first time in a couple of days. And it was interesting, the New Zealand Prime Minister is getting a lot of praise, where she's realizing right now, given where we're at, she's going to take basically a 20% pay cut. Elsewhere in the world, other leaders have a different kind of approach to leadership. Thanks again, yeah, Rob. What's that one? Leading with passion. So I wonder, everyone. I mean, and welcome,
Hey,
Dr. Martin. Welcome, Dr. Martin.
Finally.
And welcome, Maggie. We've just got going. There are a few IT problems, and it's kind of apt today on leadership. But lots of the tech things, you know, in leadership, we find ourselves with all sorts of challenges. But as leaders, we find our way through. So I'm really glad that everybody is here today. I was just saying to those people who were here before, it's interesting that today I was watching the news, and it was really interesting. I had two different takes on leadership. There was one world leader who was concerned that one world organization wasn't doing enough to help us in the situation where we're in, whilst another world leader realizes that it's going to be wise, given the challenging times that we're in order to take a 20% pay cut. What we do know, for anybody who's a leader in terms of organization, in terms of business, I don't know whether that is your iPad, can you hear us?
Yes, I have to change. I cannot work from the telephone.
Oh, no problem. Well, we can hear you nice and clear, Iris. So I just wonder, does anyone want to kick us off in terms of leadership and what leadership means to you? And especially this thing around here with Compassion Check-In, this thing about the compassion side of leadership. And I say that because maybe one of the very first things for us to recognize is that when somebody's a leader, be it somebody's a leader of a household or a family, or in terms of an organization or a country, it's not an easy job. Rob, I'm going to turn to you, because I know that you've led and you've chaired a number of staff networks and so on. Leadership is not an easy gig, right? And you work, you know, a career civil servant, you've seen probably all sorts of leaders within that. It's not easy. You've probably worked under a number of different administrations. What's your first thought when it comes to leadership?
It's funny, I'm actually putting something together at the moment about leadership and leading through crisis. And I've finished the first draft that I'm sharing with folks at the Department for Education in my new role. I think for me, there's something around leadership that it is really, or should be, about enabling others to reach for and maximize their potential. That a leader is someone that gives space for difference and for people to move into their called position within a given structure, whether it be a team, or if I reach for it with Dr. Martin on the call, a band or a group. So a leader acknowledges that people play different instruments, they have different strengths, they have different ways of contributing to the overall sound, the overall output, the overall production. And yet the leader is someone that can invite space for people to harmonize, for people to march to the same beat, for people to hit the right note, to offer the right tone and tenor and pitch, and they work in one accord to deliver a single objective or produce a single song. And I think a leader is someone that does that efficiently and does it well. I like what Covey says about leadership when he juxtaposes the leader and the manager, when he refers to the manager doing things right, but a leader is someone that does the right things.
Yeah.
And I'll press pause there.
Yeah, that's a lovely point.
The 7 habits of highly effective people.
Yeah, and I love the point that you started off there about that thing about, you know, a central part of a leader's role is that thing about harmonizing, bringing people together, helping people to develop, helping people move forward, and that thing about that one, you know, that one purpose, that one song, that one piece that people are playing, that are all playing their own particular part in. I guess one of our first starting points in terms of leadership where we experience it is in the family, right? And I'd imagine right now during this compassion check-in that it's going to be challenging, and in households, not just traditional families, but in all sorts of households. All of a sudden, people are going to have to step up and be leaders, isn't it? And make all sorts of kind of decisions around that. I wonder, is anyone happy to give us almost on a personal level, from a personal side, in terms of growing up or in terms of a household, how you feel about that thing about leadership? Anyone want to say anything about that? I mean, I'm going to jump in actually whilst you're thinking, but my first experience of leadership really was my mum, because my mum was the person who was there. My dad wasn't there. I had a stepdad who was there, and my mother is a great leader. And one of the things I learned very early on is that leadership's not easy. It can be very, very challenging. You know, you might have all sorts of people that you're there and responsible for. You may or may not have chosen that particular role, but there you are, charged with lots of stuff. And lots of people may not understand that, or may not understand the challenges that you're going through. But I think my mother is one of the best leaders that I've met. And I think over the years with her, one of the things that I've observed, she has a wonderful way of being very strong when is very required, but a lovely way, I think, picking up on some of the things you said, Rob, of almost kind of allowing a space for others and allowing others to grow, and sometimes even to let people to either rise themselves up or fall down, but knowing that you're supported. And so for me, I think there's something about that leadership in the home that I think is really, really important. Viv, you're joining us for the first time. I want to turn to you. When you think of leadership, what does it mean to you? And for people who don't know you, if you're happy to just say a word or two about yourself, it'd be lovely to hear.
About myself, I'm not quite sure.
You won't like that, Rash.
Leadership. I was brought up. Pardon?
I was going to say to Rash in particular that Viv won't invite that opportunity to say a few words about yourself because you're at the opposite end of that continuum to me.
Well, we need everyone on that spectrum. Yeah.
That's why I love you in my life.
What Rasheed said just now is absolutely true. The people in my life that I've actually looked to as leaders are usually female. Mm-hmm. I did not know my grandmother because she died when I was about 2, but my grandfather married again, and his wife, I call her my grandmother. My whole the women in my life, they've been very, very powerful, and nobody called them leaders. They called them domineering women. And I've come to realize that, you know, when vacuum, you know, somebody has to step in when there is a vacuum, yeah? And that's what these women did. And that's where I get my my march from.
Mm.
And so I think,
yeah, sorry, Viv. So sorry to interrupt. I was wondering, I'm curious to know if you'll be happy to say a little bit about yourself and your background. Also, so you talked about the family background. I'd love to know a bit about, for people here, your working background and your take on leadership from the work that you've done.
But from what point? You know, as I said, when you're as old as I am, you've got different parts in your working life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I come to the later part of my working life, which is probably not different from a lot of people on this call, is that in the workplace, when you look at, I've been kind of in this diversity space since I was like 17, actually, when there's no such word as diversity. And I got involved because of there's somebody who used to live where I used to live, and she was the first Black woman I know who was involved in politics, but she was quite young as well. I think she probably was about 30 years old. And I used to live in a predominantly Black area. And this was in Peckham, in South East London. And so she was the person who sort of got me into the whole idea of trying to influence people, yeah? So we used to have where she, as I said, she was the only Black person that was ever involved in this. And on my estate, I used to have to go around, knock doors, and try to persuade people that politics is not really the way we see politics, and that politics impacts everybody's life. And how
old were you here? How old were you here when you were getting and being?
Well, I met her when I was 17. So when I was doing this, I was about 21.
Wow. I'm struck by a couple of things of what you're saying. That thing about, there were these very strong leaders, and most of them, they were predominantly women. There's that thing about, I love this point that you're making about this thing about the person who comes to the fore sometimes when there's a vacuum. And I think that probably many people can identify with this right now in the challenging situations that we're in. One thing I'm finding observing, who are the people who show up and who are the people who shy away, or the people who are not to be seen. I think that's really interesting. Dr. Martin shared with us last time, was talking about, again, how many of the key figures had been female. I wonder, Frank, what's your take on this, on terms of on leadership? What's the first thing that comes to you? Is it from a very personal way in terms of family background? Is it through more of the professional lens that Rob was talking about?
No, for me, it's more from a family background. My first experience of leadership is different from what I'm hearing from most of the friends on this call. It's from both my grandparents, actually, both my grandfather on my mum's side and my dad's side. And for me, they were the first, albeit I was very young at the time, and it was only when I got older I began to appreciate and recognise what they had achieved and how they had gone about achieving them, because in their own respective ways, they were leaders, they were business owners, and as a child growing up, I had never experienced a Black person in those roles.
That's an interesting element of leadership, isn't it? Who is it that we actually see in that leadership role? And because that's often so significant to what we believe we might be able to achieve, or what we can aspire to, or the degree to which we're supported or encouraged. Darren, our learned friend, and I can see you, our learned friend, anything that you want to say about this thing in terms of leader? Because you play one of those roles that people that encourage from very early on, oh, you should be a lawyer. You know, one of these key roles. Mavelle was talking about it, also touched on it last time. You know, you play one of those roles in a community that people see it as a key leading figure, one of those figures to aspire to. What's your take on leadership?
Two-pronged, really. It started with me from the family background, from a home. Weekends, I was given a list of chores: hoovering, washing, ironing, cleaning the car. But I was given the scope to do it how I wanted. So what I did, I got a couple of friends in the road to help me, and that meant we could get the chores done quicker, and we went out to play football. So the aspect of leadership there is finding ways, thinking through things. You don't have to do it all by yourself. inspiring people because they may not have had the skills to iron or cook or clean or sweep or dust or whatever, and then they now can do it for themselves, or I'm sure they can. But then in the professional setting, becoming a lawyer was through people who I saw on television, Kavanaugh QC, old episodes of Crown Court, Paul of the Bailey. These were kind of, although they were fictional, they were inspiring figures, and it makes you want to find out more about them, go on careers talks, talk to people in the profession. So it's only when you do those type of things, have an inquiring mind, that, and you're amongst leaders in their fields, that, you know, you get inspired, you become motivated, you feel that you can do it, even though the odds may be stacked against you. And I think that's really my take on it. It's two-pronged, family and professional.
I like that. I like that. Iris, anything that you want to share in terms of leadership? What does it mean to you?
Well, leadership for me just means being a very good, rebellious team player. You know, it's just, I don't know, I come from a background that my parents, my father, he rebelled very early against his own parents and chose his own life. And he always used to tell us, you know, just go and do whatever you want to do. But the best professions for you are engineer, lawyer, or doctors, and actually not in that order. So he used to tell us, oh, do whatever you want, but we could choose only those sorts of professions. He was a dentist himself. And his story was quite interesting because his family had land, they didn't have education. He fell in love with his first wife that was the teacher, and then he ran away with the teacher when his father said that he couldn't marry a teacher and go continue studying. And he told us that we should follow those professions, and then of course none of us followed that profession. And one thing definitely, another thing that he used to tell us about leadership is not about who is in power, is who is surrounding the person that is in power. Wow. That is the most important. So I always saw leadership like, okay, this is the person that is the mouthpiece, but who is behind them? And sometimes I think that to be a leader is really finding out what is your place to achieve the change that you want. That sort of thing. That's how I see it.
Lovely points there, Iris. I love that thing that you introduced, the rebellious team player. I love that juxtaposition. But that thing about many leaders are people who didn't quite fit in. They did it their own way. There was that element there in your father and so on. And I can see the rebellious nature in you too, in a wonderful way. Dr. Martin, there's something that you wanted to add. Yeah, please.
It's a wonderful point that you're making, Iris, because very often you may have people in your family who, let's say you can see them as leaders. My stepfather was a barrister, for example, but that did not make me want to enter that profession at all. When I was a little boy, I was always the sort of kid that could sit in the front room with the grown-ups and tell them stories about my day, or tell them about things that were happening. And I discovered that I could engage their interest and really have them connected to me and to each other. And I would sometimes deliberately build in a break as though it was like an advertisement, you know, an ad break, and go away and leave them in suspense for them to say, get that child back in this room. I want to hear the rest of this. And I would then come back, and I knew that Act 1 had already gone past, and now we have to move to Act 2. So you have to up the ante a little bit. And what my mother and everyone in our family recognized was that I was a very good storyteller. And everyone encouraged me to use that in some way. So during my first marriage, I was so wonderfully in love in a way that liberated me from everything that was negative in the past, that enabled me to say, I want to write. And reading the autobiography of Malcolm X was the turning point in my life, because that was a story about someone who literally changed his life in every possible way. And when I was reading that, I was at the same time reading James Baldwin. And I knew that it was feasible and tangible for me to actually write because Black men wrote. I knew the Black women wrote because of various authors that people in the family would read. But there are very few successful Black men who write. And reading James Baldwin, reading Malcolm X, reading Alex Haley, because during the 1970s, Alex Haley came to the fore with Roots and so on. And so I thought, you know, one can make a living from this and you can do this. And it then became a vision for myself, something of myself. And that's how people from the outside of my family guided me to thinking that I could become what I wanted to be. And that was to be someone who wrote and someone who could inspire people around me through the stories that I would tell based on the life that I lived and the life that I saw. And that was incredibly powerful for me as a fact of life and a fact of truth, to actually document through narrative fiction things that you actually understood, rather than, you know, horror and fantasy to me is just totally irrelevant.
So there's something very powerful.
Political facts and social change, whether it was, you know, the assassination of Dr. King and how that changed a family who no longer wanted to be Christian but became Muslim, and all sorts of things told me what I was seeing and what was happening in the 1960s and 70s, that was absolutely so potent that you could write about that. And that was the leadership that inspired me throughout my youth.
Right, so something really powerful there about, for you, there's this thing about that I got a sense of, there was a space that was created. Well, you were spotting the people around who, as leaders, as figures, did or didn't chime with you. There's that lovely thing about that space that was provided, and you recognize, actually, I've got this skill to be able to communicate those qualities, those leading qualities that were there. Then going out and spotting other people who were leaders and who were writing, who were doing what you wanted to do, learning and then following that and seeing and being inspired by that and realizing actually there's a career path. So there's something very powerful about the space that a leader provides, which takes us back to Rob's initial point. I wonder, Mavel, what's your take on this? Because I guess, again, also in your career, and you touched on it last time, there's a number of different hats that you wear, which you've led, which you lead, be it in family, in certain things in career, and so on. What's your take on this from what you've heard of the conversation so far about leadership?
I mean, for me, leadership is, as you talked about, I got my first examples of leadership were in my home. So my mum and my dad had a very unified marriage. And they both had very strong personalities, but there was no doubt for me and for everybody else, and my dad would agree, that my mum was the leader of the family. But they parented us and they led in a way that was very empowering. So for us and for me, leadership is about empowerment. So my parents were very kind of non-traditional in the sense that for Caribbean parents, they were very, very open. So we knew how much money they earned. They sat us down and showed us how they rationed that money out for different things. We knew how old they were. So my cousins would come to the house and talk about their parents in a way that was alien to myself and my sisters, because they didn't know their parents. They didn't know what their parents, some of them didn't even know what their parents' middle names were or how old their parents were. And so they thought it was very odd that we knew that. So I was raised to watching leadership be all about empowerment. And so our parents allowed us to choose our own careers. Yes, we did get the usual stare about being lawyers and doctors and that kind of stuff. And that's probably why I ended up, training to be a lawyer. But my younger sister was a beauty therapist. And my older sister is an HR. So, we were raised with a sense of empowerment, and that's what leadership was about for me. So that's probably an indication as to why I do things like coaching, which is very, very much about empowering. And any teams that I lead through empowerment. So I'm very much a case, for me, when I lead people and I have teams, we're all leaders in the team. I'm not the leader of the team. Led by different people at different points based on their strengths and the need of that particular project. So for me, that's what leadership is. It's empowerment.
Well, I like that very much, Mavel, and I think it takes quite something to get to that point, isn't it? Especially if we haven't experienced that, because it really requires, I guess, something around kind of trust. I was struck by, and this is compassion check-in, so I want to be compassionate to every leader, whoever they are. For me, this morning, I observed or had news reports of two different sides of ends of the spectrum around leadership. One who decided that, actually, you know what, we're in tough times, I'm going to reduce my salary by 20%. Mm-hmm. Another concerned about what's going on, the one laying blame at an international organization for the health crisis that we're in, and so on. What's your take on, I wonder if this, and I love that point that Iris, you were making about, let's not just look about the leader, but the people who are around the leader. And I think that's incredibly important, isn't it? And the role that we all play. There's a few things that jump to my mind, but one of the things is that it's interesting what culture we live in, and whether we see the leader as, okay, they're in charge and it's up to them, and we'll do that if they haven't done it right or what have you. And, whereby we kind of, that thing where we blame the leader, why didn't, that kind of blame game, but we expect them to see us through. And then you get that other take on it, where we're far more mindful that we're all playing that part. It's only via the virtue of collaboration that people still hold that particular space. Where do you think we are right now in terms of leadership? Because I guess that a really tough situation brings out good, bad, indifferent leadership and the vulnerabilities in that individual, in terms of where they are. Anyone want to come in on that, where you feel that we are right now, either globally or in terms of different organizations that you've seen? Somebody's taken the dog out for a walk. Who is that?
It's my dog.
What's your dog? Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyone got any thoughts on that mindfully that this is compassion check-in? I mean, one of the things I want to throw into the mix is that leadership ain't easy. And I notice a lot of time when people who are leading are hurting and they're struggling, or where people are out of their depth, or they are, a lot of the time, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but you even get those leaders who are kind of bullies or what have you. And often you can see that what's going on is that they are lost. They're hanging, they couldn't possibly say it, but they're lost, or they're hurting, or they're unsure, or they're worried about being found out, and all of those things. Anyone got any thoughts on that challenge about leadership? Because sometimes there's the prestige around it. Oh, we want to gain to that position or to get to that senior position. But there is all sorts of challenges too. Rob, actually, I'm going to turn to you, because I know that this is something you're being mindful of. I know that you've seen good, bad, indifferent leadership. What's your take on what's really important for perhaps the leader to open up to? Again, I was struck by what Mavel's talked about, how her parents were very open. They shared how much money they were making, this and that, what their middle names were. Lots of leaders don't do that. What's your take on the qualities that a leader needs to have if they were actually to be successful in that?
I was taken, I put it in the chat, I was taken with what Mavel ended up focusing on, which is around the empowerment piece. And I think the empowerment is key. If when my career is over, my professional career, I'm regarded as a leader, I want to be regarded as a leader that empowered others. I want to be regarded as a leader that encouraged, supported, inspired others to be more than they thought they could be themselves. I want to be regarded as that. And that's what I strive for every working day of my life. It's about conducting myself in a way, whether consciously or unconsciously, about leading myself, my teams, the people I work with, to being more than they thought they were beforehand. So that's a driver that I have within me that has been instilled in me from the longest while. I think, coming back to the center of your question, I think self-awareness is key. I think self-regulation is key. I think understanding our motivations, our values, our purpose, our reason why. Why do I get up each day? Why do I pay attention to my physical energy, my intellectual energy, my spiritual energy, my reason for being? What is it about the attention I give that? What is it for? What is that overall purpose? And I think our ability to empathize is encouraged, and a way is made clear for us to do that more efficiently, more effectively, more lovingly, more, dare I say it, compassionately, when we understand self, when we have an awareness about I know, for example, quick example, I know that I get my energy from people. I know that. One of the big challenges for me in the lockdown is the restricted access to others. Now, further to the last compassion check-in, there are other ways in which we can switch to, or at least I can switch to get that. I'm very tactile. I'm a hugger. I like the visceral nature of relationships. I'm often found in a crowd or with a group of people. Those who know me know that to be true. So I've had to adjust as a leader. One of the reasons that I gravitate towards networks and building networks within organizations, yes, with the overall aim of empowering others, but it is about feeding me and my energy too. And that goes back to the self-awareness. Is that I know that about myself. You want to see me die, wither and die? Lock me in a room on my own for 2 days in succession. I will be dead.
Well, I love that thing that you talk about, empowerment. And because we're all leaders, I'm going to set us a fun challenge, which I've never done before, okay? I'm about to send you into 2 rooms. You're going to be split into 2 groups, okay? And
don't put me in a room on my own, whatever you do.
You're not going to be in a room by yourself. So we're just going to have a fun game, okay? You're going to be split into 2 groups, okay? And group 1 is, actually, I'm not even going to tell you who's in your group. You're going to discover in a minute who's in your group. You're going to have 5 minutes. You've got a 5-minute challenge, okay? You have got to pick 7 human beings, living or past, as a leadership team to steer us through the current challenges that we're in globally. Okay, so you've got, so you have got to, and your team agree, up to 7 people in your leadership team to steer the world through the challenges that we're in at the moment. Mindful that some of these challenges relate to leadership, some of them relate to things like the economy, public health, and the environment. Are you all up for that fun challenge? It's going to be a 5-minute challenge to see who each team comes up with in their teams. Okay, I'm about to open the rooms. Okay, and let's see what's going to happen here. You are about to go into your rooms. So let me just see what's going on here. And I am going to give you 5 minutes right now. Oh, you're probably already in your rooms. Tell me, are you already in your rooms, or are you all still with me?
With you.
You're with me. Okay.
I don't know what, I'm not sure if we're supposed to join the breakout room or stay with you.
So you are, no, I think you are. I think that you are in breakout room. Let's just see where you are. You're in breakout room 2.
Breakout room 2, okay.
Yeah. Can you see how to join it? Oh, you're there. Okay. Right, so I'm going to be here whilst they are in their breakout rooms. I'm not going to leave them a message. Minutes from now. So anyway, they are now all in their breakout rooms. I've set them this particular challenge of coming up with the Times 7 people who are leaders, who they would put together to help the world see us through the challenge that we're in now. I am just, there's all sorts of leaders, aren't there? There are people who kind of lead in, that they've got a job title that whereby they're not technically a leader, but they lead in their particular field. We've got people in the past who were actually leaders in that way. We've got people who are spiritual leaders. There are people in business who are leaders. There are so many different types of leaders. These people in the internet were leaders. You get leaders in terms of sport. It's going to be interesting who they come up with in terms of their leaders, given the challenge. So the challenge for those of you who may have just joined us is that they've got to come up with a list of 7 people who they would pick to lead us as a species through the current challenges that we are in as a society. So I'm just going to quickly have a peek in that particular room. So I was just in one of the breakout rooms, and I'm going to see what's going on in the other breakout room. Let's see what's going on here. I think I'm going to join this second breakout room and see what's going on there. So I'm just having a quick look in at what's going on in those breakout rooms. Let's see what's going on here. So I just literally just very, very briefly went into both of those breakout rooms and was just having a look in to see how they were getting on. And it's really, really, really been very, very, very interesting that, you know, they've come up with all sorts of different people. One of them's come up with a monarch, and one of them was just mentioning somebody who's very, very key in terms of the NHS. It's going to be very, very interesting seeing how they're doing. So I'm going to give them all an instruction. Let's see. So yeah, so I've just been, just in case you're just here with me, they're in their breakout rooms. I am here. They've got just a minute left. I've just been giving them a quick message saying, you know, you've just got 2 minutes now to tell us who it is that you've picked. I am just about to tell them that they have got 1 minute. So let's see if I've got an option here to give them just that 1 minute warning. Let's see, 1 minute. Let's give them that 1 minute warning. I'm trying to think who I would pick. Who would you pick? You know, who would you pick in your, if you had to pick 7 people as they've had in order to basically to help us see us through the times that we're in. I prompted them, you might want to think about people in terms of who could help us in terms of the economy, who could help us in terms of where we are ecologically, and they clearly are going to need to have the leadership skills as well. So I'm about to call them in. I'm just making a note of who I've got in each group. Here, let's see, and we've got laptop, and then we've got Darren, and then we've got iPad, and then we've got Maggie, and then we've got Rob. Okay, I'm going to call them all in. They are going to be coming back in about 56 seconds. So let's see how they get on. It's going to be interesting. Who do you think they're going to say? What people, what names do you think are going to come up? They're going to come up with? I bet you, here's my guess. My guess is that one of them, at least one of them, is going to have Nelson Mandela in. Now, I didn't hear that thing, but I bet you at least one of the groups have Nelson Mandela. I might even go as far as to say that both groups might have Nelson Mandela in their list, because I've said to them that these people can be living or they could be past. Let's see what they've come up with. Okay, here comes Mia Morris. Hi there, Mia Morris. Welcome, Mia Morris. Mia Morris, a very warm welcome to you. Okay, now everyone else is just about to come back in. And a warm welcome, Mia Morris, who is just adding in the sound. Let's just welcome everybody back. Welcome there, Mia Morris. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, teams.
Brutal.
Sorry about that. Was it me with the timing? That's brutal.
That was the feed, mate.
So, teams,
We had a sub-bench.
Just whilst you're organising yourselves, can we just welcome another OBE, Mia Morris, OBE. Welcome to the call, Mia. Just for your purpose and to give the teams just time to steady themselves, Mia. I've just set them a challenge. Today's all about leadership, Mia. And the teams, I set them into 2 teams, and they had a challenge. What up to 7 people the teams pick to see us through the global crisis that we're in at the moment. Now,
can I just, Rash, sorry to interrupt. Can I just say a hello? Mia, can you see us?
Yeah.
You can. Mia, darling.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So team 1, who was in room 1? Was that the room with Dr. Martin, Frank, Galaxy and Laptop?
Yeah.
Was that group 1?
Yes.
So you've got 1 minute to talk us through this up to 7 people you picked. 1 minute, including why. Your minute starts now.
Go, Dr. Martin.
Hold on a moment. I think I've just vanished away. I don't know if you can. Suddenly, I can't see you anymore. I'm going to say the names first of all, okay? So we've got Barbara Castle, Oprah Winfrey, Herbert Morrison, Bevan, who created council homes for veterans coming back from the war, Angela Davis, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, this is the British inventor of the internet, and the others. Take it away, please.
Viv, you go first, quickly.
One of the reasons why I came up with the name of Sir Tim Bevan was that I think he's as someone who, as an inventor, as someone inspiring, as someone who actually connects people, this was a visionary.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, and a rich blend of people there. I was trying to, just as you're going through the list, was that more than 7 or was it 7?
7.
7. Interesting.
We had a sub-bench.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? And I'll give you 1 final minute in terms of the blend of people that you picked, and just talk us through the blend. It's a minute maximum, and why you picked that blend.
I think it was about particular strengths. I think the common theme that they all had was they were all visionaries, but also I think when you look at Churchill, look at Morrison, look at Bevan, they had the drive to get things done.
And have lasting impact.
Right.
Very important. And they all changed our lives. I think that, to me, is the most important thing, that our lives have been changed through their initiative, their drive, their ambition, their vision, and of course, their organization and social system of social change.
Right, like the rationale there. Team 2, Darren, iPad, Maggie, and Rob. Over to yourselves, your opening minute in terms of your list. Who's your leader for this?
We didn't choose a leader.
You didn't choose a leader. Somebody's going to have to step in. Where there's a vacuum, a leader's going to need to step in.
I can tell you who we've got. We've got Mary C. Cole, Marcus Garvey, Sojourner Truth, Martin Luther King, Barack Obama, Malcolm X, and Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor. I believe that was the 7 we agreed. And iPad had 1 extra, which I didn't get down, but Rob got down.
Mm-hmm.
The rationale was Mary Seacole, obviously a nurse, to lead us through this time of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Garvey and Luther King, leaders in their own right during the struggle.
And entrepreneurs.
Barack Obama, obviously two-time American president, great orator, led through the Ebola crisis and I think SARS. Angela Merkel, female chancellor of Germany, number of years, I think over 10 years now.
And can I just add that she's also a chemist as well?
She's a chemist, very good.
She's yeah, quantum chemist.
What would you say for Sojourner Truth? She was
Courage, bravery.
Bravery, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, against all odds. And I think cue up Iris to talk about Chico.
That's it, Chico, yeah.
Chico, over to you, Iris.
Well, I just suggested Chico Buarque as the entertainer that we are talking about. This is one of the singers from the dictatorship in Brazil, and he could talk about the dictatorship when no one could talk about, with all the press prohibited from saying things, and he actually put in songs all the struggles that the country was going through. And for a generation like me, that from the end of the 60s, he actually is how we learn the history of our country, which is via his songs and, you know, the ones that surrounded him, the ones that he wrote for to sing. Mm-hmm. So I think that in these kinds of hard times, it's always important to have the poets, the musicians telling us the story, because there are ways of telling it badly, but it can be done in a positive way that we feel moved by it.
So a really rich list. Yeah, Rob?
Sorry to interrupt you, Rash. I just wanted to add there, because what Iris got us focusing on is, and she mentioned it there in her offering, the absolute critical importance as we journey to chronicle, as we journey to build written, recorded accounts of our journey, so that we don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past, so that we don't have to fail to seize the opportunity to learn from our present circumstance. So much that is happening even right now with certain types of leadership. It's very reactionary. It's very instantaneous. It's very system one thinking. It doesn't lend itself to capturing, and in this case with Chico, it's in the form of entertainment. What sweeter way could there be? But through the arts, through entertainment, through the wonderful advent of music, to capture and chronicle our journey, so that in years to come, our children and our children's children will not have the excuse of not having access to the lessons of that past. It's a bit like what Marcus Garvey says. A people without a knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. We are bound to failure if we do not carry the lessons of the past with us.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well done, teams. I think what was really interesting here was the breadth of these different people from science, medicine, politics, arts, etc. Really rich blend, and people who had in their own ways made a mark, and as you were saying, Dr. Martin, on all of our lives. And I love this point, Iris and Rob, that you bring in about that importance of chronicling and capturing, so that we don't fall into the same and Iris was making about that we don't fall into that same trap again. I want to, as we begin to, and as will probably be the case, always in the case, we'll probably go on to 110 if that's okay, but I want to begin to ask each of you in turn, and I'm going to be very brutal with the time, probably going to have just 30 seconds. What's the thing that for you personally, what is it, how is it that you personally are going to need to be moving forward during this chapter? What is it, almost your pledge to yourself of how it is you're going to need to show up for yourself and for those others who it is that you lead? By the way, just to give you time to think about that, I lost my wager that I was having whilst you were all in your breakout rooms. And it's interesting hearing the people who didn't make it, you know, the people who people put on the table and like, nah. Or
the near misses. We did have the Queen.
Yeah, the Queen was a good near, I heard you for that one, a good near miss.
Thank you, Rasheed. I was outvoted, but there you go. That's democracy.
I think he was trying to be controversial.
Well, I'm still hanging out on the knighthood, so you know what? But actually, there is that thing about those people, again, and that thing about picking up on the thing about chronicling, though, isn't it? sometimes it's those people who have been there, who've been through those times before. So I think that someone like the monarch is relevant in that way. You know, it's interesting. I was thinking during this crisis about those of us, many of us are very lucky that we've been born after the last Great War, and where we don't know those kind of hardships. And so there's something about that that's very interesting, isn't it? And so I love this point about the importance of chronicling. And I remember in history, you know, I was always wondering why we studied wars and why we studied this and that. And the point about helping us learn those lessons is really, really, really important. Team, so I'm going to get you to all think about what's the one thing that for you is really important for you to carry away with you, or for you to be mindful of. Mavel, I know that you won't be thrown by putting on the, being, you know, first of all, put on the spot, first of all. For you, what's key for you moving forward through these times?
I'm probably going to cheat and have two in one. Okay. But for me, it's really about gratitude and connection. What I've really taken out of this time is, you know, what I have, and what I'm very fortunate and blessed to have, because I'm surrounded by people, you know, all of yourselves on the call included, family and friends, who are very loving and very nurturing and keep me sane through this whole. And that just reminds me of what I have to be grateful for. So for me, it's gratitude and connection. Absolutely wonderful. I'm going to turn to you next, Viv. On my picture, you're the next along. So Viv, what's it you're going to be carrying with you for the rest of this chapter?
It's just to continue to be connected to the connections that I've made, and I've never center of my daily kind of life, that I have reconnected, I should have said, with certain people, and to sort of keep that going. At the moment, some of you probably know, one of my children is actually stranded overseas. So my daily thing is to keep him uplifted when he's flagging, and you know, and to encourage him, and to let him know that he will be home safe. So that's almost a job for me twice per day. So.
And it's an important one, I think that's that will chime with so many people who've got loved ones who are stranded in different parts of the world, or in different parts of the world, and where families are displaced and so on. Mia Morris, OBE, what's the thing that you would take away with you?
Respecting the quiet time. We'll never get this time back again. So finding a way of being very still and recognizing when to move, when to act, when to stop, when to rest, when to sleep.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Maggie, an award winner in your own right. Can we just say, Maggie, with that award-winning leadership programs in your own right? I thought I would just give you that bit of credit, because we share that award.
Significant contribution from Mr. Rasheed Ogunlaru, absolutely. I'm actually thinking about the diversity implications of the coronavirus, because the stats are showing high proportions of BME individuals dying, men dying, etc. And I think we have this global response, which is everybody behaves in a particular way, but I think there are some things about different communities which means there's going to be a bigger impact. Maybe they're densely populated, etc. So for me, I know we're talking about a state of mind, but I'm still wanting to think about, you know, what are the diversity implications arising from this? How can I influence the direction of travel in my organisation? So that's what I'm musing on at the moment.
And it's a really important one, because I mean, I think we're talking about that there's so many important pieces of work that were going on before this, and the risk is that lots of those things might be lost, and they might be even more important during this and thereafter. So that's an important point. Next on my picture, moving back upwards, is Rob Neal, OBE. What's the thing that you would take away with you?
I think, you know what OBE stands for, don't you? Don't tell him, Mia.
Is this a joke one? I know the real one, but you're going to say a joke one.
You know I'm going to crack a joke. You know it's going to be a joke. Some people say it's other buggers' efforts. And in my case, that would be absolutely spot on. But my daughter gave me the best one. Mia, check this. My daughter said, Dad, OBE stands for obviously black every day.
Okay.
love it. Now, in answer to your question, Rash, I am indelibly marked with what's reminding me, because as I get older, it tells me, I don't know if you can see that, folks, but it tells me that history tells me that as I get older, I might start forgetting things. And without any insensitivity to anyone who's managing that, I know as I get older, it might happen to me. So I remind myself, because I'm indelibly marked with my favorite scripture from the Holy Bible. And it is, in fact, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 13, which says, in the end, these three things shall remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these
is love.
It's love.
So that's my answer, Rash.
Well, thank you very much, because I think it takes us to the heart of the compassion check in love. You know, if I can, just before I go up to Iris, a quote that came to me recently, it's one of mine, is that everything boils down to love and compassion or its absence. Everything boils down to love and compassion or its absence. Iris, for you, what's the thing that you carry forward with you?
I think that is the importance of time elasticity. You know, I still have only the 24 hours that I had before. And before I could never focus on, well, I got distracted easily to things that I didn't need to be distracted. And now I am just focusing doing what I like doing, you know, creating time for the things that I like doing without trying to plan my life ahead. So the 24 hours now became like 48 hours because I'm doing a lot. Interesting.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I like that time elasticity and stuff. Holding on to that, the fact that you've been able to make that time rich and full of the things that you're wanting to. The learned Darren Sylvester.
Yeah, those on the call last week may have heard me say something like, we all want to go back to normal, but it's what level of normality we want to return to. I don't know if that's what I tried to get across. So I think for me, it will be about doing things differently in work and home time. Certainly in work, in litigation, there's this idea that you have to be at loggerheads at each other's throats, pointing out mistakes and dragging things on, where I think now I'm going to play it, and hopefully others will as well, as how can we resolve or solve cases rather than, as I say, being at loggerheads, and linking with other people the use of time. I'm getting rid of the superfluous and the unnecessary, focusing on what is necessary, more time with family, more time with catching up with friends that may have been neglected or not called for a while, and just more reaching out. That's me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Martin.
Yes. Not to be afraid of anything. I can bring myself up and I can help people. I think one of the things that's really significant at this time is the level of fear that so many people have. You know, it's fear about your job. It's fear of the money that you're not getting. It's a fear of so many facets that have come about. And in order to move forward, you have to be fearless. And to me, understanding that fear can be your ultimate enemy. You know, it can prevent you from moving forward, having belief, having faith, you know, having no sense of optimism. So to be unafraid, I think, is to be alive, aware, and powerful.
Thanks very much for that. And I like that thing that you talk about, that thing about fear, because we have lived in a time where there's been so much of that, and you turn on the news and there's fear here, there's fear there, fear of that, fear of that, fear of that. And so important to be hearing so much about love, that thing about love. Frank, last but by no means least, tell us what are your thoughts. What's it you're going to be taking away with you?
Well, for me, I've always lived my life in the belief that none of us is promised tomorrow. But what the last 5 weeks has really brought home to me is the actual real meaning of that. Because whereas before it was hypothetical, it was ethereal, but we are literally seeing losing people around us, left, right, and centre. So for me, it is about moving forward, how I now fine-tune my radar so that I pick up more of those, you know, more people, and I make more time for the things that really matter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And for me, I think the word comes to my mind is, I think picking up, and similar to the word, I think that around appreciation. For me, there's something around kind of acceptance and appreciation in that. For me, there's something about us embracing and realizing the flow of life, that all the seasons of life come. They all come. Summer, spring, winter, fall, they all come. We come and we go. We find that we come and go in this form at least. And there's something about the appreciation of that. And that, rather than making us something that's fearful, is something that should make us so appreciative of this beautiful, delicate gift that we call life, and that appreciation of all of the other fellow travelers that we meet along the way, and to be as kind, caring and compassionate to ourselves and everybody else as we possibly can. That's always the invitation that life's giving us every single day. Dr. Martin.
Yes, when we end this, can I suggest that, you know, whether it's on YouTube or you go to your album collection or something and just play Ads by Stevie Wonder. There's something incredibly powerful about those words. Until the day the earth stops turning right to left. Everything that's said in that song has so much to do about the affirmation of life, the necessity of love, and how we can inspire ourselves and others to keep going. So, you know, I just want to make that point when we leave. I don't want it to be a part of this conversation, but I think, you know, just to remind ourselves of what art, artistry, narrative, and motivational thinking is about, that's so effectively captured in that song by Stevie Wonder.
It's a great song. I'm just posting it.
Rasheed, I just like to remind everybody, and this is going back on the point that Rob made earlier, is that for me, we're all just marking time.
Tell us more about that. Tell us a sentence more about that.
In the context is that we're here fleetingly, and it's the impact that we make on others and those around us. So it's about making, you know, it's about the quality and the difference that you bring to people.
That's a beautiful note. I think that's a beautiful note to end it on. I just want to thank you all so much. Anyone want to got a suggested theme for next week? It's compassion check-in. I mean, it's interesting. The word that comes up to me, picking up from what you've said there, is almost, I'm tempted to offer the word legacy.
Yeah, that will work.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I'm tempted to. Legacy is quite interesting because I think it does put, and it's an interesting one with leadership, isn't it? What is it you're here to do? And if we can keep that in mind as leaders, what is my role? Be it that I'm a parent, that I'm a friend, I'm running a business, I'm a president. You know what? I'm only here for at most 1-2 terms, unless you're some presidents who play around with those rules. But you know, what is it that I'm here to do? You know, that thing about, you know, that legacy. Thank you all so much. And we've just got Stevie Wonder's As, which is one of the best songs of all time, a link to it from Dr. Martin. I just want to thank you all so much. Thanks for your time. This will soon be on YouTube. And thank you so much, groups, teams, everybody. Keep sharing your love and your light. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.